Hola, bienvenidos. Hello, welcome all. Bienvenidos a un nuevo webinar de Sudamerica Coaching. Hoy en vivo con nuestra invitada. Recuerden que si quieren escuchar el audio en español, ya lo está esperando Andrea en la opción de intérprete. Welcome all once again to another Sudamerica Coaching webinar. We got our guest today waiting for us already from her house in London. Sarah, how are you? It's awesome to have you here.
Great, thank you so much. I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you, Juan.
Absolute pleasure to have you on. Actually, we're gonna be chatting once again through leadership. We are live on Instagram, and for all of you that would like to rewatch our series of webinars around leadership in sports, I'll invite you to subscribe to our Sudamerica Coaching YouTube channel. It'll be fantastic if you could register over there, and then you'll be able to access loads of content. So Sarah, absolute pleasure to have you on. We're going to be chatting around this concept of yours, which I find absolutely unique, and it amazes me every time I hear it, around flourishing, and in this case in particular around supporting leaders to flourish. So with no further ado, I'll leave you to crack on, like you guys say.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for tuning in today. Really appreciate your time. So we're going to spend some time talking about supporting leaders to flourish. A little bit of background about me. So I played hockey for Ireland for 10 years, captained my side, and had a business career alongside my hockey world. And I became fascinated around how to really support people to reach their potential and ultimately to flourish. Went on to become a qualified life coach, went into coaching, and now I run a business called Flourish Consulting, and I work for an associate consultant for a company called Leading Edge, which very much focuses about leadership in business.
Fantastic. And once again, a todos los que están escuchando, para alterar a español, sí, cambien a la opción de intérprete. Ya lo está esperando Andrea G. Sarah, over to you. That's the last time I'm going to invite people to swap to Spanish, I promise.
Very good. So yes, so you're going to drive the slides, Juan. Yeah, great. So I thought I would open with this quote: when the best leaders' work is done, people say we did it ourselves. And I think this very much sums up my philosophy around leadership. And I really believe as a coach and in business, we need to create environments where leaders emerge and that everyone has the potential to be a leader. Obviously, leadership is not just about leading others. It starts with leading ourselves, and we must always recognize that as a key skill. So if you look at the role of a leader, it's all around really increasing performance, but how you do that is by unlocking potential and helping to remove the interferences. So that's you as a leader, but also when you're thinking about creating leaders, it's the same. How do you unlock the potential of the young people around you or the people you work with? And what are the things that get in their way that stop them from being the best leader they can be? I've developed a Flourish model through my years in the business of sport and in the business of business. And it very much has 4 pillars, which we'll go on a journey on today, looking at optimism, grit, flow, and mastery. But it's all around how do we tap into being our best self in whatever we do, and certainly in the concept of how can we be our best self as leaders. So there's a whole body of work, of research on the topic of flourishing. Martin Seligman has dedicated his life to really understanding how we can flourish in life. Same with Maureen Gaffney. She's done an amazing piece of work looking at all of the research around flourishing, and this captivated me as I started to learn more around it. But equally has aspects like behavioral economics. How do we design our environments with real purpose to get the best out of people and to create leaders and to create an environment of togetherness. What's really interesting around the flourishing research is they talk around this ratio of 5-to-1, positive to negative, for people to truly flourish. So if we're going to create environments where people can be themselves, and if we're ourselves and we can speak frankly and openly, we can be better leaders, but we need to do it through a positive lens. And I think to really understand how we can unlock this potential to flourish, we need to understand how the mind works. And Daniel Kahneman's work around systems thinking, I think, really has helped me unlock the potential of creating an environment for leaders. So he talks about there's two modes of thinking or decision making. One he calls system one, which is the autopilot, and one system two, which is the pilot. And the pilot thinks he's in control, where actually the autopilot is the one that's really in control. And it's much more intuitive, it's much more acting in the moment, fast thinking, it's implicit rather than explicit. And the language of system one is storytelling. And we need to think around how we create environments for storytelling to really create environments for people to be themselves and to lead. So looking at these three pictures here, and I'll put out to you, what do they have in common? What's at the heart of each of these that are in essence the same? And I'll do reveal on the next slide. And Joseph Campbell, who went and studied literature right across time, and stories from all kinds of different nationalities and cultures, understood that actually all stories have one structure, and then there's an infinite number of stories within this. And on the following slide, he talks about the hero's journey. And this is a really powerful model to really understand the role of leadership within your environment, or for you to understand how you're leading yourself on your journey in life. So his hero's journey, as he saw with the structure of stories, is it starts often in the ordinary world. So you have Cinderella at home with her family, and then foundations get shook and we are called on an adventure, and then we cross this threshold into the unknown, and we have trials and tribulations, and then there's an extreme, some big ordeal. Maybe you have to slay a dragon, or the equivalent in our lives, till you find the rewards and return back home, changed, transformed. We had John Fletcher on here a few weeks ago, and John and myself, we spoke at UK Coaching last year. He's my mentor in the coaching world, which is fantastic. And we talked about the power of your mentor on your journey as a coach to really help you to cross that threshold. I think back when I got my first job as England head coach with the under-18s, and remembering how crossing that threshold was such a difficult thing, the fear of going into what felt unknown, and the role of my mentor to support me. I think that supreme ordeal, you would think playing at a World Cup at home in Dublin with, you know, maximum filled stadiums should have been a highlight, and it was, but equally there were some ordeals there that I really learned so much. I think I found my voice as a captain at the time, and I found my calling in terms of this adventure around flourishing. There must be other ways. We must create environments where people can be leaders and they can flourish. And so this is a super tool to think about your journey and the role of leadership. Use this a lot in business as well. Where are you as a team? Where are you as a company on this journey? What do you need to do to travel through, and how can you support each other? And again, it talks to that system one storytelling mind. We're wired for stories.
Cool, Sarah. And if we just give Andrea a second to translate that, if you want to start sending your questions around this pillar, that would be fantastic. Good to go.
Good to go. Great. Thank you. So if we move on, so very much I've developed a flourishing model of coaching. So and this really is very much based around principles. And I think if you're going to create an environment where people can rise up and really shine, creating a principle-based approach to your coaching environment, to your leadership environment, allows people to step up to the mark. We talk a lot about self and others within this, and we have these themes around being champions, being gritty. So we have very clear principles that your leaders and your environment can really buy into. And if you look at the picture up at the top right, that's the England under-18s winning their bronze medal. I've got somebody knocking on a door here, so I'm going to have to say, wave him away.
You're okay.
Typical, he's even knocking on my window. So the picture on the top right is the England under-18 girls winning their bronze medal at the Europeans. And I look at, are they happy because they've won? Or actually have they won because they're happy? And that's the whole aspect. We will win more when we're happy and we're flourishing and we're creating environments for people to be themselves and to lead themselves and to lead each other as a group.
Nice one. We got some questions coming in, so you let me know, Sarah, when we're good to open up.
Yeah. So this environment, if you're creating an environment for people to express themselves in their leadership, and really thinking again of that systems one, we're wired for story, very much to create an environment that brings to life your story, your journey, your dreams. Where do we want to travel to? How do we want to travel? So we have a storytelling team, and they tell and bring to life our story, our experiences. If you think of behavioral economics, peak end is a key behavioral economic heuristic. And actually, can you make everything feel like you're part of a rich experience that you remember? And the people who join your storytelling team will be a different group of leaders that will join another team. So having different teams at different types of leadership and different preferences of leadership can emerge. So one of the things that's really key, and it's a real foundation of any program I put in place with any team or within any organization, is the idea of fail fast. It's big in business now, but in sports, absolutely crucial. So early on in our program, we'll have a creativity camp, and it's all about exploring failure, mistakes. But we talk a lot about the science of creativity. And there is, everyone can be a leader and everyone can be creative. It's just about connecting things. And one person's creativity is different to someone else, but you've got to create this playful environment that allows people to really explore this. So we can do this in an under-18 environment, but in club environment, we've got like a Wonder Woman Wednesday. Fletch talked about challenge cards last week, and I used the Magic Academy cards or created some of my own Wonder Woman cards to really explore our best selves. And you can give individual leadership challenges and constraints, and the person who doesn't like to step up, you could find the right time to help them emerge there and find their voice, because ultimately that's what we're looking to. Can we give everybody a voice?
Love it.
And linked to that, so this would be a typical reflection tool we might use at a camp or within the world of business. Metaphors, again, really tap into our storytelling mind. And if you use metaphors, they allow you to get to a place that's a lot richer. You can emerge and understand and have a greater sense of awareness of who you are as a person and others around you, through this. So we did this at the creativity camp, and one of the key things that came out, one question was like, who is the big cheese of creativity here? And you ask the players to come up with, the questions they come up with are so creative. Or you ask somebody, Spider, what's your greatest fear? And you get to know people at a much richer level. And that's really what true leadership is about. Can we get to understanding people at a deep level and share our vulnerabilities with each other? So yes. And finally on this section, so we've got the best intentions. We want people to be leaders. We want them to be creative, want to ask, great questions to unlock each other's potential and expression. And then we have this voice in our head that tells us, we're not good enough, or that person's better than me. And so we do a lot of work with gremlins, or inner critics. We bring them to life through some pictures, give them some names. Alliteration is always great. Dave, the doubt gremlin we have here. We've got Pen, the panicking panda. And we get quite playful around these gremlins, so that, I can say to Juan, how's your gremlin today? And so we can help each other on that journey to be our best selves. I don't know if you want to fire in with a question now, Juan.
Brilliant. We've got a few. Alex is asking, so when we are in our hero journey, on our pathway, yeah, is it necessary to tag along with other leaders that are going to influence our journey?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're on a journey and you think about what is it that's going to help you to travel on that journey, mentors, helpers, guardians, who's on your support team to absolutely give you the wisdom. If you're going to cross that threshold into the unknown and really back yourself, take risks, who is it that could support you? What are the role models? What are the people? And sometimes it could be your brother. It could be, actually having a conversation with an international hockey player. It's sometimes most unlikely of people that inspiration. But I think once you have that radar, that's what I need. You start mentors and people that will help you will just sort of start automatically coming. So design your environments to allow that to happen. And I'll share a little bit more about how we're doing that currently with the under-18 program.
Brilliant. Joshua wants to know when has been that peak moment with the current squad when you said, "Oh, I'm here," and he also wants to know how did working with Fletch get you through this, and what did he change? What did you change? Sorry.
I love it. So I think it's really interesting. If I look at the under-18s there that won that bronze medal, that was absolutely a peak to go on that journey. And yes, the winning medal is brilliant, but it's how they went about it. Like, we were 2-0 down against the Germans in half time, and we had half the team were sick the night before. The captain, who was a crucial player, wasn't playing. Like, everything was against us, but the strength of character that they showed to come up and find a way to win and to believe right to the end, and they stayed calm, and the Germans just started losing the rag, and that's a brilliant moment. For Fletch, I think he's a great mentor on that hero's journey, because you do have rocky roads, and to have someone alongside you that's there for you, but to challenge you. And I think that's the real beauty around developing people is, can you have a positive intent that they know you're there for them, but actually that gives you permission to really push and challenge them. And that's what Fletch does for me. And that's what I hope to do for the leaders that I'm looking to support to grow as well. Great question, thank you.
I've got the last one on this one, if that's okay. Yeah. Alejandro wants to know your thoughts around giving leadership roles to various people within the squad in order to try to make that absolute leader flourish. What are your thoughts around that?
Absolutely. Like I mentioned earlier, like, we'd have a storytelling team in around, and different people will become your leaders within that environment. Currently, we've got 5 different groups, and it was all through a co-creation process. We've got a team togetherness group through lockdown. We've got a skillfulness group, and each one has a leader within it. And then what we do is we rotate the leadership teams on a regular basis. So not everyone, but you're kind of a good core group of people with a good mix will constantly get leadership skills. And you go throughout every camp we have. We're playing Ireland, we'll have 6 leaders. And each day there'll be 2 co-captains for that team. So they're building up the muscle of leadership. And some of them will never, would be really afraid to speak in a group or not have a voice, but it's the journey that you bring them on. You need a mix of people. And so really, if you say that everyone can be a leader, then you need to make sure you represent that in terms of the journey that you go with, in terms of bringing people onto those leadership teams.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Thanks for all the questions that keep coming in as well. Should we move on to the next one, Sarah?
Sounds good. So the next element really around leadership is thinking around how do we create a real environment where people can flow, be their best. And this is really around understanding that leadership is about going outside of your comfort zone. If we stay within our comfort zone, we're not going to grow. And if you're going to lead yourself to grow, you need to go outside your comfort ground. And if you can role model leadership to others, that they'll go outside their comfort zone. And that's really when you get the balance between challenge and skill. If you get that balance, you can get into that, at your best flow zone. But to really grow, you need to start always tipping yourself into that higher challenge. So as a coach, you're creating an environment with that in mind the whole time. How can I challenge this group? And I talk about 75% safety, 25% challenge. Is it really psychologically safe? But then where do you have that challenge to grow them? But as they again know that the intent of challenging you and challenging each other is to grow each other, to be our best, then you have permission. And you grow in confidence through that. And people often talk about how do you cultivate confidence. You grow confidence through action. Every time you take a step toward risk and you try something, and even if you fail and you learn, you grow, and you grow that confidence, and you express your individuality. By expressing who you are, you grow in confidence and togetherness. So we talk a lot about this as the way we are as a group and our leaders within it. And so key to leadership is awareness, and an individual and a group. When are you at your best? When are you at your worst? What are your strategies for you being at your best? How did you manage your state? And I'm feeling quite up for today. What can we do? We'll spend a lot of time looking at these strategies. And really, a lot of wisdom comes from your teams. Rather than you tell, actually talk to your players, get to recognize who does visualization well here, who uses mindfulness here, and get them to tell their story. So they're teaching each other their strategies. And often when you feel you've got shared experiences, I've got this life-work balance, study balance, I'm struggling with it. I hear other people doing it really well. I'm learning, rather than you, the top coach, telling people. It's a much greater way. And you can scaffold this, you can add stimulus to this, you can guide people, but allow their voices to really shape this. And each group is unique, so they will shape how they want to be their best when it comes to big tournaments. And that's the joy of going, being open to going on a journey with people. They come up with ideas you never thought of. So how do we prepare ourselves to really thrive under pressure? So we will have a camp each year called Finding Flow, Calm in the Chaos. We had it last February with the under-18s. We were playing against Ireland, and we as coaches want to create space for leaders to emerge, and not just one leader, a whole team of leaders. So this scenario-based chaos camp, we threw chaos at them constantly. The first thing we did was a lot of them going out to play Ireland for their first cap for their country, and we as coaches didn't turn up. Now they'd already got a briefing, a tactical briefing, and they'd prepared all of their tactics, and there was enough players from last year to guide the players this year, and they went out and they played great hockey. And the only thing they could do was ask us questions throughout that game, and we would just give them a score if it was a good question. 7. We didn't answer it. We said, it's the 8th question. And then halftime, we took off their hockey sticks and they got them to swap sticks. You're playing with a stick you never played with before. Players hate that. And we got people playing out of position, and we just rolled the dice on chaos. What chaos might come next? And then when it came to, we played in a Six Nations last year, and early in the morning, 10 o'clock game was due to start against the Dutch. It was covered in glass. A game got moved to 7. The girls managed themselves brilliantly all this day because they'd been in this. They'd managed these scenarios. They led themselves through that day without very much input from us. 7 o'clock, 2 minutes into the game, we're 1-up against the Dutch. It was 2-all, unfortunately, but it was a really good performance. So this is my map of the world, and there's absolutely a spectrum by which we play, whether we're coach-led or player-led. There's definitely times when it needs to be coach-led, and there's definitely times when it needs to be task-orientated, isolated. But if you really look at the game that we play, and I would argue the life that we live in, even now really proves it, it is a dynamic system that is chaotic, and really you have to equip players and your leaders within business to be able to function and make decisions for themselves. So again, really creating an environment where it's principle-based that actually allows leaders to emerge so they can make the decisions when the chaos comes their way. And so your training, your environments needs to practice and create this in the everyday. And at the heart of that map, I had self-determination theory, choice. If we're really going to allow us to grow as leaders and fly together, self-determination theory is really rich in terms of us thinking around how we grow. So the idea of autonomy, giving people choice, the idea of competency, making sure they always feel capable, go back to that flow model, but also that they feel that they're valued, they belong. And if you do that, you get greater motivation, you get greater performance, greater creativity, and greater self-organization, greater group of people being able to lead themselves when it counts. So I think that's that section. So I don't know, Juan, if you want to fire in if there's any questions.
Yeah, there are a few coming in. I've got one for you. I'm going to be selfish with the space, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Any examples around your coaching group? So you've gave us lots of examples how to develop leaders within your players, within 17, 18-year-old girls. But obviously you will be working with loads of very talented coaches, yeah. And I can think of a very clear example. But yeah, anything that you've got in that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously within your coaching team, so I'm co-coach with Kate Richmond-Walsh at Hampstead, my Premier League club that I play with, my coaching team with the under-18s, but I also mentor and coach develop as well within that. And I do think the biggest journey that you go on is to understand yourself as a leader. I think the starting point has to be self-awareness and who you are, what you value, and what's important to you, and then start to shape a philosophy that you own yourself, and then to take risks to try that, to back yourself. And I think a lot of the times when you're going on a journey with people is to back each other, or, you know, as you go coach developing, to actually give people that sort of support to try stuff, because they can soundboard off you, and there's nothing like having somebody you can trust to soundboard. And that's why I love working in a more of a co-coaching environment, or co-leading, I would call it. I've never been one for hierarchy. I believe everyone has so much to bring that if we create that environment, everyone's voice is heard, you will learn so much more different perspectives.
Brilliant. I've got a question here from Gerardo around ages. So what sort of, what would be your recommendation around working with within the leadership space and giving people leading tasks, yeah, in order to develop them? Any age groups, anywhere you would do it, anywhere where you wouldn't do it?
Yeah, start from age 0, I think.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I've got my 8-year-old son out in the garden at the moment, and the amount of garden sports we've been playing. But I think young people have incredible natural abilities to be leaders, to find what's of interest to them. And, you know, young environments, often gamifying your environment for young people, they come up with great things. The kid that doesn't say much, when you put the right angle in it or ask the right question, absolutely finds their voice. So I think it's about getting to know the group of young people that you have, find out what's interesting to them, and that you can help them to take that step toward leadership, whatever that step is for them. But they need to feel they've made that step. So I would go be absolutely intentful, purposeful, whatever age group, for creating leadership and to share it out. I mean, I've been a captain of a country, for a long time, and actually it feels like a lot of pressure, where shared leadership, particularly for young people, is often a much healthier and better way to go, and to switch it up and to change it so that they then can step out of that at times, or dial it back up when needed.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Sarah. Thank you, Gerardo, as well. Sarah, Fernando wants to know how you develop decision-making among your leadership group.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing is important to have your principles. So having your guiding principles about who we are and the values that we have. If you put your principles very clearly around how we operate, who we are, what we value, and you co-create those with the group, even though you've got a strong sense of where you want to go, because your vision of creating that environment for people to flourish, then there's a lot of safety for them to operate within that. You've given them the guidelines or the guide ropes, the scaffolding, and then you need to give them space. You need to give them space to fail, give them space to try. So if I look at, we've been doing over lockdown some tactical watching tasks, and you know, you could spoon feed them in terms of how to go about it, but actually, you know, we had the leadership team on last week, and one group was doing it really well and the other group doing it less well, and they were explaining how well they were doing it. And it was, you know, what I do is I divide up the tasks. I ask who wants to take what task. I set up the Zoom call. We get people to jump on. If somebody's not partaking in it, I just have ask them a question about why. One of our big values is don't judge, always be curious, always find out, ask people questions, have one-to-one conversations with people. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does. I'm sure it does. I'm going to combine a couple of questions to try to wrap it up on this pillar, and we'll move on. Any thoughts around what values are most important to you in terms of developing those leaders, and what sorts of activities? I know you've touched base on a couple of them already, but how will you try to develop them?
Yeah, so I think I suppose a key bit would be, a value would be about helping people to find their own voice, expressing their individuality, feeling comfortable with being uncomfortable, but creating safety for that, so that they feel that they can have an environment of trust in around that. And I suppose the other key aspect is really getting to know people, so that actually it's coming from understanding what's important to them. So going back to that self-determination theory, people, if they feel valued and they have a sense of belonging, they will open up through that process. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics that we do as well. I think every single time you design any part of your environment, you've got that in your mind. How do I create this group of people to be leaders? You know, whether it's the leaders within the leadership teams, or actually it's about leadership within everybody within that. So I think everything you do, you're planning your sessions in around that. So who's going to set up captains for this? Only the captains can talk for this next 20 minutes. No one else can talk on the team, if that's what's needed. You just have to be really creative about what's needed for that leader in this moment, or for this group in that moment. Maybe you're working on challenging conversations, then you create an environment around how do we really challenge each other and feel really respectful and valued within that. And people can rate each other. You can rate, well, I felt, you know, Juan did that brilliant. I'll give him an 8 out of 10. What did he do? Be specific, unpack the details, and help people grow those skills.
Fantastic. This is my favorite slide, by the way.
So if you create an environment where you ask players, you know, to really own their environment and to lead within their environment, Jen, one of the girls there who's in the orange Nike top, came up with this idea of selfies. So every day when they go training, they take a picture of themselves and put it on our WhatsApp group. And this started years ago, and they're still doing it now. Every day the selfies are popping in, and the players really understand, like really appreciate, like, okay, we're not together at the moment, but I see you running, it makes me run. So how do we create environments, firstly, where people come up with these ideas, but then secondly, create environments that actually just nudge each other to be our best, to lead ourselves, no matter what the kind of conditions are or the environment is. And, you know, training hard, it doesn't come naturally to everybody, and we need to support people around that. And so we do a lot of work in character strengths. And again, going back to, there's all types of leaders, there's all types of strengths, and actually the appreciation of the best teams know what their strengths are, both as a player, or, you know, what you do within the business place, but ultimately who you are in terms of your character strengths. Is it perseverance? Is it bravery? We've just gone through this process here with the team in the last 2 weeks around bringing your super strengths, your character strengths to life. And they've done the Martin Seligman character survey, and their 5 top strengths. They've brought those to life. So again, we're learning more about each other, and that's the key to leadership. Do we really know each other at that level? So I think if we play this, I think we might have one of those videos coming up here, Juan. Yeah.
That's the interpretation of my character strength, and I interpret it as having a positive attitude and a growth mindset. So he doesn't have a name, but he has a little message that says, "A little lemon aid to help. Help keep you feeling positive and rid any sour thoughts. Hashtag zest is best." Love it. That is brilliant.
So that very much became a mantra for our team, Zest is Best, through that process. And if we go on to the next slide, Juan. So we'll also talk about our strengths through the medium of Lego. So I'm a Lego serious play facilitator, so use Lego a lot within the business place and think about design thinking. So we have, Claire sharing her strengths, character strengths here, super strengths. We play this one.
That's brilliant.
And I love this. This Claire is as gritty as anything, but she talks about a soft heart. And I think that's, you can be both. And I think it's the paradox of one doesn't exclude the other. And I think what we try and do is talk very holistically about character strengths and who they are, and to get to know each other at that level. And through that process, we do a lot of work around then, how do we trigger our character strengths, and how do we trigger our best self in terms of who we are and how we lead ourselves. And one of the things, one of the mantras I have is through effort comes magic. And I really do believe, and this is again thinking around some of our principles and values, if we put our focus on effort, it really frees us up to play and have magical hockey, but it also frees us up to be really our best selves and to be leaders through that process. And the players will also co-create mantras each year that really fit with them as part of their journey, getting them to create their language, like Zest is Best, and they own that story is really, really important, that journey of leadership. So should we fire some more questions?
Yeah, we could. Yeah, actually, we're going to go from one end to the world to the next one. We're going to go with Matilda's question here from Argentina. She's asking about your experience as a player. If you had coaches that actually try to get this, what can we call them, this non-cognitive skills to develop within yourself when you were captain your side and when you were playing for your side, and obviously what was the impact as a coach nowadays?
Yeah, so I think I would have gone through a journey where there was just not enough. It was very hockey based, very tack focused. If anything, it was, I had, in some cases, I had coaching where actually if you beat the person down, they'll rise up stronger for it. And I kind of alluded to my World Cup experience previously. And, I think it stood in my mind, we lost the game against England on strokes, and I missed the first stroke for a crucial game. And that night, the coach turned around to me and basically looked me in the eye and said, "Today we lost because of you, Sarah." And I think, having coaching that really brought you to the lowest point of who you were, that's when I found my voice and said there had to be another way, and became really curious around potential and learning around it myself. And I do believe that we absolutely as coaches need to build in the whole spectrum of, psychological well-being, holistic, and we know, I mean, you know yourself as a sports person, how you can grow so much. And why don't we equip people with all of these strategies that will not just serve them on the field of sport, but serve them in life? And so that's a big mantra of mine now. So thank you for that question. I can see one of my hockey players, Claire Samways, there, who probably knows, and we play together for Ireland. I'm giving her a wave.
There you go. There you go,
the
Claire.
experiences I'm talking about. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm gonna go to Charlie, all the way in Singapore. Charlie, we are hearing you now. Off you go.
Thanks, Juan. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for the presentation so far. Just a question for you. I think a really good one for you, being a strong female role model, is how do you overcome cultural issues with females as leaders? So for us out in Singapore, it's a challenge of bringing the community in, and perhaps with family pressures on what the role of a female is in society. I might even say it'd be a bit similar back in Ireland as well.
Thanks, Charlie. Well, you're touching on a topic very close to my heart. It's like you can see the slides coming. So I work with Sport England on female coaching on their strategy currently, and there's a big lot of work that we need to do. There's embed cultural biases that absolutely are challenging the role of females in coaching and in leadership roles. And so we need to really understand what those biases are, and then build really robust systems in place to overcome those. So, you know, how you go through recruitment, because otherwise it can just be the usual network running its system and perceptions. There is also a whole lot of work that we need to do in terms of what does good coaching look like. We have certain views about that. What does leadership look like? We've got a lot of stereotypical, you know, males are like this and females are like this, whereas actually you look at, you know, men need to express their emotions and actually open up just as much as females do. So we need to strip back a lot of these gender nuances and start having some real grown-up conversations. And I do think there's momentum, but we've got a long way to go, and it's a big job, but I'm definitely up for it. So thank you for the question, Charlie.
Fantastic. Shall we move on to the next one, Sarah?
Yes, let's do it. Yeah, so kind of the final pillar is very much around mastery. And I think if you look at leadership, ultimately, it's around creating mastery. And people who are most successful in life have this desire to be masters of their craft, whether that's as a parent or whether that's as a hockey player, as a coach. We go on that journey and we're really purposeful. But we also should be playful. We should also see it as a joy at the heart of it. And if you look at real success, it comes down to the story that we tell ourselves, that we're playing with a purpose. So if you look at the GB team winning in Rio, they had a higher purpose than they did around medals. You would think winning a gold medal was a pretty high purpose, but their purpose was around creating a legacy and inspiring the future and being the difference. And they had co-created those values, that purpose, and they translated that into their everyday habits as a group of individuals, as real leaders within that team. And that's not something that's coach-led. That's something that the environment, you create the environment for the environment to start really taking ownership of its desires and its passions and its ultimate purpose. And then you can see Maddie here with her water bottle, just priming herself through her mantras to be her best in those moments. And when you have a higher purpose like this, it does free you up to perform at a higher level. You're less stressed, you're less fear. And each and every single person within this group knew their strengths and could lead on the pitch in terms of the role that they were playing, and the absolute support system that you create around yourself. And for that to really happen, and I talked about it in terms of principles, led really having a set of principles, having an end in mind. Within England hockey, we have a real robust set of end in mind principles and a way of playing that's really important to the environment that we're creating. But also, how do you bring those principles to life in a week in, week out basis? With the under 18s, we've got our own playbook of principles, our own language that we're co-creating and developing as we go. So the GB girls would practice this on a weekly basis, and they would have these thinking Thursdays at Bisham Abbey where they owned the day completely. The coaches would just give them a challenge and they would have to find a way to win. And so they're in the the final against the Dutch. I can't remember the score. The 3-1 they were down at this point, and the coach turned to them and said, look, it's thinking Thursday, you've been here before. So how you prime people around your principles to be able to just turn the dial on them when you need to, so that they could lead themselves in those moments. And so this is a rather full, busy slide. So this is our lockdown journey that we've been on as a group of players, and we've definitely seen it as an opportunity to flourish under fire. We've got players to really explain, like share how they feel, you know, confused. I love how one of them put the line through exams, CSEs, all gone, and how are we feeling, asking a lot about how are we feeling, how do we, you know, what are we enjoying, what's different. We talked a lot around resilience. Within that, what's your support system that's going to allow you to really stay resilient, be resilient leaders of yourself and you as a group. We co-created what we wanted this space to look like, and the girls came up with 5 different groups and leaders running each one. I think I talked about team togetherness. We've got fundamental fitness, like fundamental. We have a telling our story group, skillfulness, and within it we have a leader appointed for a period of time, and then that leadership changes. Within that, we had like little images there, like the duck. You know, what are you doing to allow yourself? Bring an item to the call that allows you to show how you are flourishing. What are you doing to lead yourself through this lockdown period? If we just go on to the next slide. And I think this is something that's really important. Learning to learn, but learning to lead, the power of role models and co-creation. I talked a lot about co-creation in this process. And this is Kate and Helen Richardson-Walsh. So obviously both players playing for GB for 17 years, both leaders, incredible leaders within their worlds. And so we've invited them onto our virtual training camp, or super strength training camp we had last week, to share their story. We had Alex Danson-Bennett, another top GB hockey player, on our grit camp a few weeks before that. Esme Burge here, she's just become a senior international only in the last year. So she's come on to share her story, but also to run an S&C class. And so to, I think, really bring some proximate role models, people who are close to their world, but also people who've been there and done it. Because what was wonderful about Kate and Helen is they were just so down to earth. Like Helen was telling a story how she hated training and found it so difficult. And it was so relatable. You don't have to be perfect. You have this sort of image of what leadership looks like. And actually it's quite vulnerable. And actually the biggest thing around really being open to who you are. Within that, we've talked here around these tactical tasks. So the player, giving them a lot of space to, once they have the guidelines, give them briefs to really watch games, present back, make sure that everybody on their team presents back. Everyone has to avoid, to try and present back creatively. So they get to the key point, the key principles, but then they have to add creativity. So at the weekend, they had poems and all sorts coming out around their key principles to engage each other. And they learn through that process of how to lead a smaller group of 5 or 6 and where the challenges are. And they can always check in with us. And one thing we'll always say, we don't want to hear about people individually who are not doing the task. What we can do is help you to unlock the potential of your group. So you never feel like you have to tell. You can just talk around how we support you to help that person, unless obviously it's something that's really important within that. And we would do a lot of buddy calls where we would jump in a Zoom call with they're in mentor groups, and then we've got buddies and they work together. So the more you can chunk your group into smaller groups and lots of connections, that becomes really important way to grow that leadership as a muscle, as a way of being, as kind of real DNA within that. And as I said earlier, when you give people space to co-create, they come up with ideas that you never thought of, and you learn so much from them in that process as well. And so the next slide, this was really a lovely end to our call with Kate and Helen last Saturday. We asked them, if you were to give some advice to really help these young upcoming players to flourish, what would the advice be? And the biggest advice they said was to be kind to yourself, to really have a sense of a power, like a self-compassion, and to really not to judge, but to know that you are enough. And I really think this paradox of knowing that you are enough and yet you're striving to be your best and you're not there is at the heart of great leadership. And to know that's the same for others. And I think this idea of self-compassion means you can't win at all times. Failing is part of being human. And actually this helps to silence the inner critic and boost your self-esteem. So creating a kind environment absolutely is the heart, to me, of great leadership. And then, so going back to Charlie's one earlier, I think a great leader also knows their why, and this is something that we do a lot with the players. What is your why? Why are you doing this? What is it you want from this? You mightn't have all the answers now, but to really tap into that. And leaders that know their why, people gravitate to them, people follow them. And for me, one of my big whys and my purpose is to support people to flourish, but also particularly I have a big focus on supporting females to flourish as powerful leaders in sport, business and life. And I use Lego to really help me find my purpose. And that's me with the US coaches at a conference before Christmas. And we spent a whole day really embracing what it is as female coaches to flourish within that. You make great connections. So this is a worldwide ambition of mine. Yeah. And then, yes, I took flourishing so seriously. I went to Italy and bought a room a number of years ago and converted it into a retreat. So we run retreats in Italy around flourishing. We should be there right now this May, but we're not there. We have started our podcast as well, but hopefully we'll be back there in the near future to continuing our flourishing retreats. So yeah, Juan, that's the end of the slides.
So I'm going to stop sharing that screen for a second, and I've got loads of questions that I'm going to try to get in before Instagram kicks us out, and I want to be respectful of your time as well. Sarah, one of the questions that came in, and I think most coaches in this school would have been through, is got to do with that individual within our squads, within our teams, that we all know there that he or she has the right leadership attributes to go and lead that team, but perhaps that person doesn't want to engage in that role. Any thoughts around that?
I think if they have those attributes, they're probably doing that job already. Whether they want to take on an official role, because I think we need to recognize co-captains on leadership teams. It's just a tag, a name that you give something, and of course it becomes a key bit. But people can be leaders irrespective of whether they're on the leadership team. Sometimes you don't choose, or you don't, you absolutely purposely say, okay, your leadership skills are so strong within this. I think we would give the experience of captaincy for this to someone else or a leadership team, and this is the role that we see you playing. Does that fit with you? Ultimately, I think you have to follow people's wishes, but if you've gone back to that potential minus interferences, is there something that's blocking them? Is there a curiosity around actually what's stopping them? Is their hero's journey to step into that and actually, to embrace being a leader? So I think you need to know that individual, and if there is something stopping them, that you can help them navigate around, or maybe it's actually what they want right now and that's the right thing for them. So yeah, it's all about knowing the individual, I would say.
Fantastic. Sarah, just before I leave you to wrap it up with your final thoughts, I'm going to invite everyone here to our next webinar on Monday with Russell Earnshaw, who's a former under-18s rugby coach. He also coached England Sevens in the World Circuit, and now he's a co-founder with John Fletcher, who was on this call on this webinar just over a week ago, and we're going to be trying to discuss anything to do with developing leadership within the coaching team as well. So Sarah, there's loads of thank you messages coming through the chat and Instagram as well. Obviously I want to be respectful of your time, and everyone's here, and I know Andrea has been there for an hour trying to translate, and I'm sure she's doing a marvelous job. But before I'm going to leave you with your final thoughts to wrap it all up, and then I'm going to open the mics for everyone here on Zoom to say your thank yous to Sarah, and I will be seeing you back same time in your countries, same ways to get connected on Monday.
Great. Well, thank you all. I've really enjoyed spending time with you. I hope that's been useful. I suppose the big takeaway for me is that everyone is a leader and everyone has the potential to lead in a way that's right for them. And can we help people through the support we give them to find their voice and their individual expression? And I think when you do that and you create environments where people find their place within a group and understand what leadership means to them, I think you can create some magical experiences that stay with people for lives in a really positive way that grows them as a person. So yeah, thank you very much. Really, really enjoyed sharing my story with you today around leadership.
Thank you, Sarah. And we're going to finish with some chaos. Sarah is now here, and you all the best, and see you Monday.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah.
Thank you. Thank you, gracias. Bye, Donkey.
Gracias.
Oh, I'm with you, Claire, there as well.
Gracias.